The storm had been sitting over Gray County since noon, and by the time Fraser Kinross pulled off the highway, his Audi was making a sound that cost a great deal of money. He coasted onto the gravel shoulder just outside the town of Dunmore and sat in the dark, watching the rain come down in sheets. His phone showed 1 bar, then none. He was due in Toronto for a board call in 14 hours. His overnight bag was in the trunk, and the nearest town, according to the sign he'd passed 3 minutes ago, was 2 kilometers east. He got out. The rain soaked through his jacket in under 30 seconds. The bakery was the only thing still lit on Dunmore's main street. Ardent Bakery, said the sign above the door, painted in faded green with a small sheaf of wheat beside it. Through the glass he could see a woman stacking chairs onto tabletops, her back to him, flour on her dark ponytail. He knocked. She turned, looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the floor slowly and opened the door 2 inches. "We're closed." "I can see that." He pushed wet hair off his forehead. "My car's dead on 7. I need to call CAA. Could I use your phone or borrow your Wi-Fi for 2 minutes? She studied him the way she might study a cracked window pane, assessing the extent of the damage. Then she stepped back and let him in. "Don't drip on the floors, I just mopped them." Her name was Brynn Deschênes, though he didn't know that yet. She handed him a phone charger and pointed at a stool at the end of the counter without being asked, which suggested she'd dealt with stranded motorists before. She didn't offer tea. She went back to stacking chairs. He called CAA. 45 minutes minimum, and the part his car needed wasn't in Dunmore. It would have to come from Owen Sound in the morning. He put the phone down and looked at the ceiling, calculating the cost of this delay in meetings, phone calls, momentum. "There's tea if you want it." She hadn't looked up. "Kettle's on the counter, mugs are on the hook to the left. I'm not serving you." "I didn't ask to be served." "Good." He made the tea himself. It was better than anything his assistant ordered from the place on King Street, though he'd never have said so. A large orange cat appeared from somewhere near the back and sat down directly in front of him, staring. "Does it bite?" Fraser asked. "His name is Rye," she said, "and it depends on his mood." Rye apparently decided his mood was generous. He put both front paws on Fraser's knee and settled in, as though Fraser were a chair that had been placed there for precisely this purpose. Brynn glanced over, and something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, exactly, but a small notch of surprise. "He never does that," she said. "Lucky me." She went back to her papers. She had spread them across the far end of the counter, a mess of invoices, receipts, and what looked like bank documents. Fraser could read a financial statement from across a room. It was a talent that had made him a great deal of money and very few friends. What he saw on those pages was not good. He shouldn't have looked. He looked anyway. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." She didn't look up. "That refinancing letter. Is the bank meeting tomorrow?" The pen stopped moving. She raised her head slowly. "How did you read that from there?" "I have good eyes and a professional habit I can't turn off, sorry." She set the pen down. For a moment she was very still, and he thought she'd tell him to mind his own business, which would have been fair. Instead she said, 9 o'clock, and they'll say no. They said no in March. They said no in July. The answer is always the same. She paused. "Because I'm a single woman with a small business, and they don't consider that sufficient security." Fraser said nothing. He knew how banks thought. He'd been on the other side of those conversations enough times to know she was right. "What I actually need," Brynn said, "isn't a phone charger." She looked at him with a directness that was slightly unnerving. "What I need is a husband." The word landed in the quiet bakery, like something dropped from a shelf. "I beg your pardon?" "Not a real one." She said it as though the clarification were obvious. "Just for 9 o'clock tomorrow. Someone to walk in beside me and sign the co-application. They've already told me, if I can show a second income, a partner, a co-signatory, the terms change. The whole conversation changes." She picked the pen back up, "But I don't have one, so." Fraser looked at her. Then at Rye, who was still sitting on his leg and appeared to be following the conversation with mild interest. "You're serious?" "I am not a person who jokes about her mortgage." "You just met me." 40 minutes ago. I'm aware." She didn't seem embarrassed. "You're stranded. Your car isn't going anywhere until tomorrow." And from what I can see of those documents from 10 feet away, you know what a loan application looks like." She tilted her head. "Am I wrong?" "No," he said, "you're not wrong. I'm not asking you to pretend you love me. I'm asking you to sit in a chair and be a person who co-signs a document. In exchange, you can have the room above the bakery for the night, and I'll feed you breakfast before the meeting." She considered. Real breakfast. Eggs and everything. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Somewhere down the street, a sign swung in the wind. Fraser had built a company worth $300 million by knowing when a situation had leverage and when it had none. Right now, he had none. He was dimly aware, had nothing better to do until Owen Sound sent a throttle body actuator in the morning. "All right," he said, "but I have conditions." She raised an eyebrow. "You have conditions?" "You just proposed a business arrangement to a stranger. It's reasonable that the stranger has terms." "A beat, then fine, what are they?" He thought about it. "I see the loan documents tonight. Before I agree to sign anything, I want to know what I'm putting my name to." "Reasonable. And if anything in those documents suggests misrepresentation, I walk away." "Also reasonable." "That's it." She blinked, clearly having expected more. Then she reached under the counter and produced a handwritten piece of paper. "My conditions are longer." He took it. The list was written in careful, even handwriting. 1. You stay in the upstairs room. The kitchen is not yours. 2. Do not touch the sourdough starter on the second shelf. It is 47 years old and its name is Harold. 3. Rye bites before 6 a.m. You have been warned. 4. About the bakery, the building, anything, without discussing it first. 5. Falling in love is not part of this agreement and will not be entertained. He read to the end and looked up. Rule 5 seems unnecessary. Rule 5 is the most necessary one. She took the paper back. Do you agree to all of them? He thought about Rule 3, about Harold, about the woman standing across the counter from him who had offered a practical arrangement to a soaking wet stranger without a flicker of embarrassment. He thought about the loan documents and the way she'd been sitting with them alone in a closed bakery on a Thursday night. "I agree," he said. She put out her hand. He shook it. "I'm Brynn. Fraser." She made him sign the list before she showed him upstairs. The town of Dunmore, population 642, ran on two things: the Saturday market and the information network maintained by its residents with a dedication that most governments would envy. By the time Fraser and Brynn walked out of the Dunmore Municipal Building the next morning, a woman named Shirley had already told 4 people, including the woman at the pharmacy and the man who ran the hardware store, that Brynn Deschênes had gotten herself married to a man in a very expensive coat. By noon, 3 separate people had stopped into the bakery to congratulate her. "I heard you eloped," said the first. "You move fast," said the second. "Is it true he's a millionaire?" asked the third, who didn't bother with preamble. Brynn was behind the counter making change for a rye loaf. "He's a guest," she said. "He's staying upstairs while his car is repaired." "Shirley said you were holding hands at the courthouse." Shirley was not at the courthouse. She has a cousin who works in the clerk's office. Fraser, who was sitting at the end of the counter reviewing the bakery's expense ledgers. She'd allowed this, reluctantly, after he pointed out twice that he did this for a living. Looked up just long enough to catch Brynn's expression. She was doing something careful with her face, holding it very flat and still, which he recognized as a person trying not to laugh. "My congratulations," said the customer, and left a full tip jar on her way out. When the door closed, Brynn pressed both hands to the counter and exhaled. "In one morning I've apparently become a married woman with a rich husband," she said. "Shirley works fast. By supper they'll say I'm expecting twins." He turned a page in the ledger. "This column here, you've been underbilling your wholesale accounts by 18%. She straightened. "I know. Do you know why? Because if I charged them the right price, the cafe on Miller Street would stop ordering from me and make their own bread, and that's 30% of my monthly revenue." She paused. "I know the numbers, Fraser. I've been living with them for 3 years. He closed the ledger. "I know you do." She looked at him, uncertain what he meant by that. He picked up his coffee and didn't explain. What he understood, looking at Brynn's books, was that she was not bad at her business. She was surviving inside a system that kept moving the edges. The bakery turned a real profit 4 months of the year. The other 8, she made up the difference with catering orders, the Saturday market, and what he suspected was very careful grocery shopping. She wasn't failing. She was treading water in a pool that someone else kept making deeper. The CAA mechanic arrived at 2. The part from Owen Sound arrived at 4:30. By 5, the Audi was theoretically ready. Fraser stood beside it in the parking lot. The rain had stopped. The sky over Dunmore was turning the particular orange-pink that happened in small Ontario towns in late September. The kind of color that didn't exist in Toronto because Toronto's sky was too busy being reflected in glass towers. He went back inside. "The car's fixed," he told Brynn. She was sliding a tray of dinner rolls out of the oven. "I heard the truck leave. I'm going to stay another night," he said. "If the room's still available." She set the tray down and looked at him. "The arrangement was for 1 night." "I know, but I want to finish going through the ledgers." He paused. "There's something I want to check." She studied him for a long moment. Then she said, $60 a night. Same as a motel on the highway, and I don't charge for breakfast." "Done." She put the rolls in a basket and slid them across the counter toward him without being asked. He found the problem on the 3rd day. He'd been going through old invoices, putting them in order, the kind of task he usually delegated to a junior analyst, and now found oddly satisfying with his sleeves rolled up at Brynn's kitchen table while she worked in the back. The invoices were from a property management company. The building Ardent Bakery occupied was rented, not owned. The monthly amount had gone up twice in 3 years. A 3rd increase notice was tucked at the bottom of the pile, set to take effect in January. He pulled it out. Read the letterhead. Kinross Property Holdings, a subsidiary of Kinross Development Group. His company. He sat with that for a long time. Rye jumped onto the table and pressed his face against Fraser's wrist, and Fraser sat very still, looking at the paper. He knew about the Dunmore project, the way he knew about 60 other active files. In quarterly summaries, in acquisition maps, in a column on a spreadsheet. His VP of development, a precise man named Gerard who had been with the company for 11 years, handled the ground-level work. The corner lot on Dunmore's main street was flagged as held, pending lease expiry. That was all Fraser had ever seen. He hadn't known it was a bakery. He hadn't known it was Brynn's. He could leave now. He could get in the Audi and drive the 2 hours back to Toronto and let Gerard handle the lease expiry the way Gerard always handled these things. He could tell himself he hadn't known, because he genuinely hadn't known. He was still sitting there, holding the letter, when Brynn came through the kitchen door. She saw his face first, then she saw the paper. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the air pressure in a room. "Kinross," she said. "Yes. That's your name. It's my company." She took the letter from his hand without asking. "Read it," set it on the table. Her expression didn't collapse into anger the way he'd expected. It went very, very still, which was worse. "You came here to take my building," she said. "I didn't know it was your building. I want you to know that." "Your company came here to take my building." She corrected herself with a precision that felt deliberate. "Your company has been raising my rent in increments for 3 years. Your company has a development file with my address in it." She looked at him steadily. "I assume you want to put something glass and expensive here." "A boutique resort," he said. "Mixed commercial. It was meant to revitalize the main street. By removing everything that's already on it." He didn't answer, because she wasn't wrong. "I want you to leave," Brynn said. "Not tonight, right now." He left. He drove 40 minutes south before he pulled over on the shoulder of the 10 and sat with his hands on the wheel. The Audi was very quiet. It was a car designed to eliminate noise, to smooth everything out, to make the world feel like it happened at a remove. He called Gerard. "The Dunmore corner unit," he said. "The lease, I want it put on hold." A pause. "Fraser, we're 6 months from expiry, the timeline." "Put it on hold." Another pause longer. "Can I ask why?" "Because I said so." He hung up. He drove another 20 minutes toward Toronto. Then he turned around and drove back. The light in the bakery was off, but the light above the bakery was on. He sat in the parking lot for a moment, and then he called her. She didn't pick up. He texted, "I want to tell you something, and then you can tell me to leave again." 3 minutes, then back door is unlocked. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the table, not doing anything in particular. Rye was on the counter watching Fraser's entrance with the concentrated judgment of a cat who had made up his mind and wasn't revisiting the decision. Fraser sat down across from her without being invited. "I put the lease on hold tonight," he said. "Development on the Dunmore file is paused indefinitely." She looked at him. "That doesn't fix what your company has been doing to my rent for 3 years. "No, it doesn't." He folded his hands on the table. "I'm not here to fix this with money, Brynn. I'm here because I found something else when I was going through the invoices this afternoon, before I found the lease. A folder of photographs tucked in the back of the filing drawer. Old ones. The building, from the outside. There was a form underneath them, a heritage designation application. Started, but never submitted." She was very still. "The building is from 1887, he said. "If that application were completed and filed with the provincial registry, the building would receive heritage status. Nobody could develop it. Nobody could significantly alter it. It would be protected." He paused permanently. "My grandmother started that form," Brynn said quietly. "She died in March. I didn't know she'd even found it. It's most of the way done. The photographs are all there. The architectural description is complete. It needs 2 more supporting documents, a historical occupancy record and a municipality letter of support." He looked at her across the table. "I have a firm in Ottawa that handles heritage designations. Usually I hire them to contest applications. This time I want to hire them to complete one." The kitchen was very quiet. The fridge hummed. Somewhere in the building, a pipe ticked in the cold. "Why would you do that?" Brynn said. "Your company loses the property." "My company loses a corner lot. There are other corner lots." He paused. "There isn't another Herald." She looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at the shelf where the sourdough starter sat in its ceramic jar, fed and covered for the night, 47 years old and apparently indestructible. "Rule 4, she finally said. "No decisions about the bakery without discussing it first." "I'm discussing it." "You already called Gerard." "I called Gerard to pause the lease. The heritage firm is a separate call. I wanted to discuss it with you first." He waited. "I'm discussing it with you now." Brynn stood and went to the counter. She stood with her back to him for a moment, and he had the sense she was doing something careful with her breathing. "If the heritage designation goes through," she said without turning around, "the development deal is finished." "Yes." "That costs your company money." "Some. Less than you'd think. The land itself isn't what we needed. It was the corner address for the site plan. There are 2 other lots on that block that would serve the same purpose." He paused. "I looked it up on the drive back." She turned around. "You came back." "I did." "I told you to leave." "You did." He didn't apologize for this because he'd decided on the drive back that it wasn't something he was sorry for. Brynn looked at him for a moment longer. Then she pulled open the second drawer and took out the handwritten list, the 5 rules in her careful handwriting. She set it on the table between them. "I want to add a rule," she said. "All right." "If this arrangement continues," she stopped, started again. "If you're going to be here while this gets sorted out, I need you to be honest with me. About everything. Business decisions, what you're planning, anything that touches this building or this bakery. No more surprises." "Agreed." "And I'll be honest with you." She sat back down. "I knew something was off about the rent increases. I didn't want to look too closely because I was afraid of what I'd find." She paused. "That wasn't fair to me, or to you, I suppose, since you ended up sitting in the middle of it." He hadn't expected that. He watched her face, which was steady and direct and tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "The firm can have the application submitted within the month," he said. "Municipality letters usually take 6 to 8 weeks after that." "That's February." "Around then." She nodded slowly. "I can get through to February." "I know you can." She looked at the list again. Then she picked up the pen and added a 6th rule at the bottom, in the same careful handwriting as the others. He leaned forward to read it. 6. Honesty, always. That seems like it should have been first, he said. It should have been, she agreed quietly. I wasn't expecting to need it. The heritage firm in Ottawa was called Beaumont and Associates, and they were fast and thorough, and only mildly surprised when Fraser Kinross, who had paid them handsomely over the years to argue the other side of exactly this process, called to engage them in the opposite direction. They did not say this to him directly. They said they would have preliminary findings within 2 weeks, and that the file looked promising. In the meantime, Fraser drove back to Toronto, attended his board meetings, and found himself, on 3 separate occasions, reaching for his phone to tell Brynn something that had nothing to do with the heritage file. A news story about a bakery in Prince Edward County, a passage in a book he was reading about small Ontario towns in the early 1900s. The fact that the coffee at his office was, he'd finally admitted to himself, genuinely terrible. On the 4th occasion, he called her. She answered on the 2nd ring. Harold's doing well, if that's what you're calling about. It's not. Rye knocked a full bag of flour off the counter this morning. The kitchen looked like a snowstorm. I'm calling, Fraser said, because I broke Rule 5. A pause on the line. I'm aware, Brynn said, that it was listed as non-negotiable. You wrote it, so you set the terms. He paused. I'm telling you because of Rule 6. Another pause, longer this time. He heard her exhale, not a sigh exactly, more like someone setting something down that they'd been carrying for a while. When are you coming back? She asked. I was going to ask if I was allowed to. The room's available, she said, $60 a night. I'll be there Friday. I'll tell Shirley, Brynn said. She'll have us expecting triplets by Saturday morning. He laughed. A real one, not the version he used in boardrooms. It surprised him slightly, the ease of it. Friday, he said. Drive carefully on 7, she said. It's not a forgiving road. He was halfway up the bakery's front steps on Friday evening when the door opened. Brynn was already there, flour on her sleeve, Rye sitting beside her left foot with the expression of an animal who had reserved judgment and arrived, at last, at a conclusion. She didn't say anything right away. Neither did he. The list had 5 rules and then a 6th, and they'd agreed to all of them, and one of those rules had been about falling in love, and both of them had broken it. And there was something clarifying about standing on a bakery step in small-town Ontario, with the autumn cold coming in off the fields and knowing exactly where you were. You're letting out the heat, Brynn said. He stepped inside. She closed the door behind him. Rye walked once around his feet, and then settled in the corner as though nothing of any particular significance had occurred, which was, in its way, a kind of endorsement. Brynn went back to the counter and picked up the pen. She took the handwritten list down from where she'd pinned it to the bulletin board and wrote a 7th rule, and then held it out for him to read. He came to stand beside her and read it over her shoulder. 7. Some rules are meant to be broken. This is the only one. That's a contradiction, he said. Most honest things are. He stood there for a moment, close enough that she could feel the cold still coming off his jacket. Then he said, For the record, I came here because of a broken car. I know. I stayed because of Harold. No, you didn't. No, he agreed, I didn't. Outside, Dunmore's main street was quiet. The painted sign above the door swung once in the evening wind. Inside, the sourdough starter sat on its shelf, patient and alive, doing what it had been doing for 47 years, keeping something going that was worth keeping. Rye climbed onto the counter, looked at both of them with great deliberateness, and knocked a spatula onto the floor. Some things, it seemed, never changed, and certain others, quietly and without announcement, changed everything.